What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Dynasty Nerds YouTube channel. If you've been here for a minute and you're like, who is this guy? My name is Marco. I am going to be creating content for the Dynasty Nerds here on YouTube for this season and hopefully beyond. And today I am bringing you 5 moves to make in your Dynasty leagues right now. So there's a couple things that I think are really important to do in the offseason outside of your typical, work the waiver wire, make trades, be active. And there's 5 things I think right now you can do in your leagues that can give you an advantage heading into even, OTAs, offseason programming, but especially into the actual season itself. So the first one, acquire mid to low level, assuming low level tight ends. Right now, if you look at how tight ends finish year in and year out over the last 3 to 5 years, there's on average 4 to 5 tight ends that end up finishing the year as a tight end 1 who are going either undrafted or on your waivers or who can be acquired for a future 3rd round pick, a future 4th round pick, a combination of the two. Think of guys like Robert Tonyan, Logan Thomas, Austin Hooper when he had his moment, Hayden Hurst, Zach Ertz last season. There is a number of tight ends year in and year out that you can acquire for fairly cheap that can end up helping your team to compete if you are a contender. So there's some names that I think right now you can target at the tight end position. One is a guy who a lot of people were in on last year, but he didn't really do much. He dealt with injury. He didn't really show up to, the offseason programming, so he's a little bit behind. But it's Jonnu Smith. I think Jonnu Smith can be a nice value. He showed up to OTAs already, we know. I think he could get a nice connection with Mac Jones going forward. Hunter Henry is obviously going to be there, and it's going to be a little bit of a hit or miss. But again, we're looking at the mid to low level tight ends. I think Jonnu Smith could have opportunity to have a nice bounce back season this year. Okay. The next one is kind of obvious, and you're kind of guessing right now, but you're going for the Chargers tight end. Jared Cook is gone. They signed Gerald Everett, who I think is a nice target right now, but he might be a little bit more expensive than the guy who I want to talk about in Donald Parham. So Donald Parham is huge. He's 6'8". He is kind of the red zone guy for them when he is healthy. He's scored 3 touchdowns both of the last 2 seasons, and he's done it on like 30 targets and 20 targets. And so he seems to be a guy who he has the size and the ability to really show out on this offense without Jared Cook. And he is in his 3rd year with the Chargers, 3rd year in the NFL, which we know 3rd-year tight end breakouts are definitely a thing. So that is a guy I would love for you guys to target, and you can probably get him, like I said, for a future 3rd-round pick or a pair of thirds. If you want to throw a future second at Donald Parham and Gerald Everett, go ahead and get them. I think that's a fair price to pay for tight ends that could pay off for the long haul for your team because they're both really young assets for your team. And if they do break out, you could have them for a while. Okay, the Bucs tight ends. We don't know what's going to happen with Gronk, so go see what you can pay for Cameron Brate or Cade Otton, who's the rookie. I think both these guys are going to have decent opportunity, and you can buy them right now for cheap. David Njoku is another guy who's on my list. He's a guy I don't think you're going to be able to get super cheap, especially with the new contract, but if you can go find the owner or the manager who's rostering him right now and see what the rest of their tight end room looks like. Maybe you can steal David Njoku away for a future pick or an asset that maybe you're stacked on at wide receiver or something like that. So I think he's probably one of the more expensive guys on the list, but you can go get him right now. And he could be a nice piece for this offense whenever Deshaun Watson does get to play or whatever they do at quarterback. We'll see, but I think he's a value right now. The last 2 are Adam Troutman, who obviously last year didn't show out to what a lot of people were expecting, but he could fit nicely into this offense. He played a majority of the snaps, and a lot of that is because he's such a good blocker. That is a hindrance to his tight end fantasy value, but I think Troutman right now is someone that he could have the opportunity, and like we've talked about before, there's always these guys that show up. Why? Because the guys who are given targets are the guys who are going to end up as tight end 1s, and Troutman is in line for potentially a fair amount of targets that could get him into that tight end 1 conversation if all goes his way. The last guy is a guy I'm all in on, and I'm all in on his quarterback as well, but we'll talk about him in a minute. Brevin Jordan. I think Brevin Jordan could be in for a really nice season and could be set up really well for a 2023 true breakout season, but we could see hints of that this year. And right now, again, he's a guy you can throw a second at and go get for a nice return, and I think he's someone that you could almost plug in pretty comfortably in your lineup right now, and I think he's going to flirt with tight end 1 numbers week in and week out because this team basically has Brandon Cooks right now. John Mechie was a guy they added, but again, he's a guy who's not going to be healthy for a little bit with his torn ACL last year coming out of Bama. So Brevin Jordan, I think, is a nice piece on that Texans offense, which is kind of devoid of talent everywhere else. Okay, the second thing that a lot of people might not be in on, but I need you to hear it. Buy the dip on Antonio Gibson. Buy the dip. Right now, he has fallen to the 5th, 6th rounds of drafts, and there's owners that are panicking right now because of the addition of Brian Robinson and the return of J.D. McKissic. J.D. McKissic, the return of him is definitely something you need to take into consideration. He's going to lose some target opportunities to J.D. McKissic. Brian Robinson will probably play here and there, but here's what Brian Robinson did in college. He was a backup, he was a backup, he was a backup, and then he was an average player at Bama. He is not someone I am really panicked about taking a bulk of the work from Antonio Gibson. Antonio Gibson the last 2 seasons, and he was battling J.D. McKissic during some of this, and a potential broken shin in some of this. Over the last 2 seasons, averaged 14.37 fantasy points per game, which is around 245 fantasy points if you put it over a 17-game season, which means that would have been good enough to be RB8 last season. And not that I'm saying he's RB8. He's probably not going to be. He's probably going to be a running back too. But right now, he has basically been cast out when it comes to dynasty circles, a guy that nobody is really interested in. So go ahead, buy the dip on Antonio Gibson, and I think right now RB2 is his floor because he's been a very, very high-end RB2 or a low-end RB1 both years in the NFL, and I think you're set up for that again in 2023. Okay. The next thing, and it's kind of an obvious one, but I think you can get some of these guys for cheaper than you would be expecting, except for the first guy. But it's Target Premier running back handcuffs. And this kind of seems like, again, kind of like a duh, but there's a couple guys that I think right now you can get for a fair price that could end up seeing a ton of work if one thing goes their way. So the first guy, probably not super cheap, but go see the price on Tony Pollard. I think Zeke has kind of been in a little bit of an up and down roller coaster when it comes to his value this offseason. A lot of people are really in on Pollard, but who knows? A week, 2 weeks into the season, what Pollard's workload's going to be. It's probably going to be less than people are expecting. So I think right now, up until the first couple weeks of the season, Pollard can be a buy opportunity for you. The other two, or the next 2 guys on my list, are rookies, so they're a little bit harder to come by, especially during rookie draft season. But if you can go get Isaiah Spiller and Rachaad White, if they're not currently on the teams of Leonard Fournette, the Leonard Fournette manager and the Austin Eckler manager, I think both these running backs are in for a decent amount of workload as is. And then if the guys in front of them were to go down, I think Isaiah Spiller specifically could be a RB2 with upside to get into RB1 category if Austin Eckler were to go down, just because of how good that offense is and really what Isaiah Spiller is. I think Isaiah Spiller, of these 2 rookies, is probably the guy that I want more because he can be a weapon in the receiving game. He can be a weapon in the run game. And he's probably, even with Eckler on the field and healthy, he's probably going to see 145 to 185 opportunities this year. It seems like a lot if you look at the last couple years, but they've been searching for the 1B or the RB2 to Austin Eckler for the last couple of years, and we know that they haven't found it. I think they have officially found it in Isaiah Spiller. He's a good player. We saw the tape. Even though he didn't test amazing at the combine, if you watched Isaiah Spiller all throughout college, you knew that the combine wasn't going to be his time to shine. What he does is football IQ, vision, patience, footwork. Those things don't always show out in a combine where you can look at a 40 time and people think that's all that there is. Isaiah Spiller's better than what he tested. I think he's going to be a perfect fit for this Chargers offense. The last 2 guys I want to talk about, Melvin Gordon. People are presuming he's dead because Javonte Williams' hype is out of control. I've got right now Javonte Williams as my RB14 for 2022 because I think Melvin Gordon proved last year he's far from done. He is going to be an asset for this Broncos team. Sure, they were willing to let him walk, but the reality is they brought him back. They brought him back for 1 year, and this is an opportunity for them to utilize a complete offense, whether it be Russ, their pass catchers, their running backs. They have so many weapons here, and I think they know that if they want their players to have longevity, they have to use everyone on this team. And I think Melvin Gordon, while he might not get 50, 55% of the touches, I think even with 35 to 40% of the touches, Melvin Gordon is going to be a value, and you can get him for absolutely nothing right now. In a league, a dynasty league I'm in, I traded a 2024 and a 2025 second, and I got Melvin Gordon and a 2023 third. That's great. I'll take that if you're a contender because Melvin Gordon is going to put up points early, and I think he's going to put them up consistently enough to be a flex, a bye week fill-in, if not more. My last guy to talk about here is Michael Carter. Obviously, the addition of Breece Hall makes Michael Carter's volume significantly lower. I think Breece Hall is obviously a dynasty superstar. He's going to be that. He landed with the team that I wanted him to land with the most in the Jets, but I think Michael Carter will still have opportunity. I think Michael Carter, similar to Melvin Gordon, but obviously younger, could see 35, 40% of the touches, and that's enough for him to be a low-end flex, a bye-week fill-in, and obviously, if anything were to happen to Breece Hall, I think Michael Carter could be in the RB2 conversation, maybe high-end RB3 conversation. He's going to be involved in the passing game, which means he's getting the valuable touches. Maybe he won't get a ton of goal line opportunity, but again, this team is going to be throwing a lot, and I think Michael Carter will benefit from that, whether Breece Hall is healthy or not. So go ahead and try to get Michael Carter similar to the price of some of the other guys I mentioned. We got 2 more tips for you guys. Number 4 is in super flex leagues, or honestly in 1 QB leagues, if you're desperate for quarterbacks even, go check what the price and the discount is on Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr, Matt Ryan, Jameis Winston, and a guy I really, really am pumped about as a under-the-radar quarterback in Davis Mills. A lot of people have kind of talked about Davis Mills in this offseason, but here's the reality. Christian Kirk and Derek Carr are low-end QB1s right now, and high-end QB2 at worst. They're guys who have great weapons, and I think they are pretty much the unsexiest QB1s on the entire list. So they're guys that you can probably acquire at a pretty steep discount because people don't typically think of them as, hey, Kirk Cousins can be my quarterback 1, but he can be. He can be if you have a loaded roster of skill players. So I like Christian Kirk as my number 1 guy to target. And then, Derek Carr is pretty good as well. He's got Devontae Adams added, so that's another huge value. And then for me, Matt Ryan, Jameis Winston are kind of those guys where they're kind of rentals. They're probably not long-term answers for their team, but 2022, maybe 2023, they could provide value as a QB2 in Superflex leagues or as, that bye-week fill-in. Jameis, I think, could be a QB1 for 1 QB leagues. And so I think those are guys that are nice, but again, they're more rentals than the first 2. And then the guy that I really like as a young quarterback to go target, and he has been getting some hype, but I think you can still get him kind of cheap right now, is Davis Mills. Davis Mills, to me, is better than every quarterback that came out in this last draft class. I think he is probably the next Kirk Cousins. And I really like some of what the Texans are starting to do. I think they're setting themselves up to add a lot of talent in 2023. And so Davis Mills could get a big boost. He's still got Brandon Cooks. He's got a guy I mentioned earlier in Brevin Jordan. No matter what you think of Dameon Pierce is there. And so I think Nico Collins even is an underrated wide receiver. I think he's not going to be special necessarily, but he'll be an average NFL player, which is just another boost to Davis Mills, having someone who can catch the ball and is a big body to target in the red zone specifically. So I like all of those quarterbacks: Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr, Matt Ryan, Jameis Winston, and Davis Mills. If I had to prioritize them, I'd do Cousins, Carr, Mills, Jameis, Matt Ryan, but it's up to you. All right, the last tip or move to make for you guys is sell these 2 wide receivers. One of them, you're going to probably be like, okay, I could sell him. The other one is probably going to make you a little uncomfortable, but I think it's a good idea for you, and I'll tell you why. Okay, the first one, Chase Claypool. I don't think Chase Claypool is going to continue to develop all of the fine-tuned things of a wide receiver. I think physically he's one of the more gifted wide receivers in the NFL. A lot of people were comparing him to DK Metcalf, but the major difference between these two is DK Metcalf, no matter what people might want to tell you, has actually improved as a route runner. He has fine-tuned all of the true wide receiver skills rather than being just this physical freak. And Chase Claypool, I don't think he's shown maturity. I don't think he's shown tons of development. He's been used a little bit gimmicky, and I'm not really sure if the Steelers think he is going to be a true game changer at the wide receiver position. That's why they added a guy in George Pickens who has his own questions, but Deontay Johnson might leave after this year, and I think George Pickens, not Chase Claypool, if they can avoid any off-the-field issues, I think George Pickens, not Chase Claypool, would become the wide receiver one if Deontay Johnson were to leave. And I think by the end of the season, even with Deontay Johnson there, George Pickens will jump Chase Claypool as the wide receiver 2 on this team. And if we talk outside of wide receivers, they've got Pat Freiermuth, they've got Najee Harris, and then their quarterback is rookie Kenny Pickett, who I think is fine. I don't think he's elite. I don't think he's a very special NFL talent quarterback, but he's okay. Or Mitch, and so I think basically with that situation, with all of the competition for targets, with the quarterback situation, Chase Claypool is going to probably lose value as the season goes on, not gain value. If you can go ahead and move Claypool right now for a young wide receiver asset, one of the running back handcuffs I mentioned before, plus a pick or something like that, I would definitely do that because, again, I think his value is going down. And now for the second wide receiver, I think you need to sell, and it's going to be unpopular, but you got to hear it. Gabriel Davis. Gabe Davis is a good player. He couldn't beat Emmanuel Sanders out for targets, which is a red flag because Emmanuel Sanders wasn't prime Emmanuel Sanders. We all know that. But the other thing is, if you look at really what you can actually expect from Gabe Davis, I'm working on my projections right now for the 2022 season, but Gabe Davis right now, I have, and I think it's kind of generous even, 103 targets, 70 receptions, 788 yards, and 9 touchdowns. I think the targets and the touchdowns are a little generous for Gabe Davis, but if he were to do that, he's shaping up to be a high-end wide receiver 3 at best. And again, I think I'm being generous with those projections. And right now, he is going, I think, as wide receiver 23 or 22 in Dynasty startups. So you can get wide receiver 2 value for Gabe Davis because he's young, he's tied to Josh Allen, and he might have some blow-up weeks where you're like, dang, why did I trade Gabe Davis? But when you look at his entire body of work for this 2022 season, I think it's going to be underwhelming. Try to sell Gabe Davis right now because you're going to get probably way more than you should for a wide receiver who is a very good wide receiver 2 for an NFL team, but for fantasy, he's probably capped out as a high-end wide receiver 3 bye-week fill-in with the occasional blow-up week. That's kind of what I'm expecting for Gabe Davis. All right, guys. Well, if you liked my video, comment down below with any questions, thoughts. Hit me up on Twitter at Marco_14P. I love to answer questions. I'll respond to whatever you guys want to send me. Thanks for tuning in. I hope I can bring you some more content soon, and I will see you next time. Peace.